here for a few more minutes. We got when Josh joins us here in just a moment. If you have not been given the ability to record and you want to, please speak up so we can give you that. All right, Josh is on. So, all right, well, we're real quickly here. Our format today, appreciate everybody jumping on with us. It's a large group. Athletics Director Josh Whitman will lead off with a statement regarding the Big Ten's announcement today. We've also have a statement from Chancellor Robert Jones, and then head coach Lovie Smith with a short statement, and then we'll open it up for questions. For those of you who report on Illinois regularly, there is some ticket updates on this. You know, this has already been kind of in the works prior to this announcement today because of what had happened back in August. But our ticket and premium seating reminders is that their previously paid ticket money would roll over to the 21 season. They also, if they want to donate that money to the iFund, or they could actually ask for a refund. And our ticket office and premium seating folks will be reaching out to everybody involved with that in the coming days. We've also got Randy Ballard, who's our Director of Sports Medicine, and he's on the medical subcommittee of the Return to Competition Task Force. So he might be able to answer some questions and more specific from the medical end when we go to the Q&A. So just remind you, please mute during the statements. And then as I read, I'll go down the list of the questions that are queued up in the chat line. So, and we'll get through as many as we possibly can to go. So, Josh, having said that and gone through the particulars today, would you please lead us off with an opening statement regarding the announcement from the Big Ten today?
Sure will. Thanks, Kent, and good afternoon to everybody. I hope you're doing well. We have had, I think, as everyone knows, a number of hard days here over the last 6 months, and this is not one of them. This is a day when we can smile and feel good about the decision we've made and the excitement that I hope we created amongst our fans across not just this institution, but all 14 member institutions here in the Big Ten, and certainly for our student athletes. I really am beyond excited for this athletic program, for the Illinois football team, and for the young men who have chosen to be a part of this Illinois football program. I've stayed in regular communication with them throughout this entire process, and in particular here over these last 30 or 40 days. And I know how badly they want to play, and I know how much today's decision means to them, and the opportunity to go out into Memorial Stadium and to play a Big Ten schedule, to have a chance to compete for a Big Ten championship, and to have the opportunity to participate in the postseason are all very meaningful things to our young men, and really grateful to the conference for affording them that opportunity. I do feel a tremendous amount of gratitude today to a lot of different people who have helped us get to this point, and I put a list in the statement that we released today, and I'll run through that briefly here as well. But starting with Commissioner Warren and the Big Ten staff, they have truly been tireless throughout this entire experience, and I think everyone has redoubled their efforts here over the last 40 days. Just can't thank them enough for all that they've put in to make today possible. The athletic directors across this league, the other 13, I think going into the pandemic, I was very proud to call them colleagues. I think sitting here today, I don't feel any hesitation to say that I feel very proud to call all 13 of them friends. We've been through an awful lot together, a lot of interactions, a lot of phone calls, a lot of hard discussions, and it certainly has brought all of us closer together. Our football coaches across this conference, again, we're very fortunate in the Big Ten to have a collection of coaches who are visionaries, who are leaders. They are very passionate about their sport, and certainly here at the University of Illinois, we are no exception. And I'm really pleased to have Lovie Smith here as our head football coach, and never have seen his leadership more on display than during these last 6 months of this pandemic. His flexibility, his patience has really been without match, and I really am grateful to have him as a colleague and a friend, and to have him at the helm of the Illinois football program. Our medical professionals, again, across the conference have really been first rate. Can't say enough good things about the advice that we've received from so many different members of the medical community here on our own campus. Randy Ballard, who is with us today, has led that charge. Our Associate Athletic Director for Sports Medicine, a longtime member of the staff in this community, has truly been exceptional in his work to understand this virus. And he's been joined by Jeremy Bush, who's our head sports medicine professional with our football team. Between the two of them, they have formed truly a dynamic duo, and they have been on the forefront of this from the very first day. And can't thank them enough for putting us in a position to be where we are now. Jared Zimmerman, our head team physician, and all of our partners over with Carl Medicine have been tremendous, as well as Dr. Parker here in the McKinley Health Center on our own campus. Our staff has been so patient, so flexible, and just willing to pitch in wherever necessary to help us get restarted. And I just can't say enough good things about them. And then last but not least, certainly our student athletes. As I said in the statement today, they have been an absolute inspiration to me and to others. From the day we sent them home and we saw videos of them pushing cars and lifting tires and doing all the different jumping on and off of trash cans, their commitment has been on full display from then on, and certainly continuing with bringing them back to campus and the commitment that they have shown, not just to their training, but to the sacrifices that they've had to make, the proper decisions relative to their social behavior and doing the right things to manage the spread of the virus has really been critical to getting us to where we are now. And I just can't thank them enough for their patience with us and their ongoing pursuit of excellence here at the University of Illinois. Also want to thank Chancellor Jones. And we'll have a chance to hear from him here momentarily. Truly an exceptional leader, someone who has been steady from the day he walked on campus and certainly throughout this entire pandemic experience. His leadership has been unflappable, and I just can't say enough good things about his willingness to listen, to engage with me and others in hard conversations. He is experienced. He doesn't jump to conclusions. He takes the time to truly understand the issues in front of him and then help us chart a path forward. And this experience relative to the football season has been no exception, and I just can't thank him enough. Last comment really is just how proud I am to be associated with the University of Illinois and with the Big Ten Conference. I think that both our institution and the conference to which we belong, we live our values. I think our values are in the right places, and we've seen that throughout this COVID experience. We've prioritized the health and safety of our student athletes. I think that we're very fortunate here to have thoughtful leadership across our 14 institutions and at the conference office as well. And I think that we have set the standard in terms of innovation, both on our campus and now in the conference, for the way we're going to approach this virus. It's not going anywhere. I think we've all come to accept that at this point. We're not going to just wake up one day and the virus is away from our life. It's going to be a gradual process of watching it rescind away. And we're in a position now with the work that's being done here at the University of Illinois through our SHIELD team, and now at the conference office with our adoption of the daily antigen testing and some of the other protocols that we put in place to truly be on the forefront of demonstrating to the world how we can continue to live and navigate successfully, safely in this COVID-19 environment. And so very proud to be a part of this university and this incredible conference, and looking forward to seeing our student athletes take the field and a very successful season for Illinois football. So with that, I will pass it over to Chancellor Jones. And again, want to thank him for taking time out of a very busy schedule to join us today.
Well, first of all, let me start by saying good afternoon, everyone. It is truly an honor and a pleasure to have this opportunity to be with you today as we celebrate the return to our athletic program and specifically football for the fall. I just have to say one thing that I want to emphasize in my brief comments. It was scientific data and information that led us to make one of the most difficult decisions I've made across 42 years of higher education. And that was on August 11th when we had to decide to postpone our football program that was already scheduled to start to occur. That decision was driven by good science and the data that we had at the time. And so it was a difficult decision, but it was data driven. Now we find ourselves here on this date, September 16th, in a position where we had the opportunity to make another data-driven decision. It was a great pleasure to be with my other 13 colleagues as we listened to the valuable scientific information presented by the medical committee that persuaded some of the physicians and others that really had great concern about trying to go ahead in the fall, unequivocally say, yes, we can do this, because a lot of the concerns that were raised that led to the previous decision, as far as we were concerned, had been addressed in many ways more thoroughly and effectively than we could have imagined. And so very, very proud to be part of the decision-making process that once again will allow us to compete and allow our young men to be on the field of practice and competition, and to make sure that both of those environments are COVID-free. That's the core at what we were wanting to create, to have some sense of assurance that our young people could come back and compete, but compete in the safest way possible. It's an absolute requirement for us. And we think what we have embarked upon now with the antigen testing and the daily testing, which no other place I know of, no university, no athletic program is doing, really gives us the best chance to have a successful season in terms of mitigating the spread, as well as making sure that we keep our players safe. But I also want to emphasize that we will continue to make decisions as we go along based on what we know. This daily saliva testing and the ability to collect the data that would allow us to make sure that whoever is on that football field, both on the field and on both of the sidelines, are COVID-free, gives me some great sense of assurance that yes, we can do this, and we can do it better than anybody else in the NCAA and anybody else I know. So that makes me extremely proud. So thank you for allowing me to be with you today.
Thank you, Chancellor. Next, we'll go to head coach Lovie Smith for a short statement.
Good evening to everyone also. Good afternoon, I should say. We as a football team, we're just thankful for our leadership. Of course, Chancellor Jones, he has some tough decisions to make, and we realize how hard he's been working to get us back on the football field. And of course, to Josh Whitman, our athletic director, who has put in a lot of hours to also ensure that, you know, our players have a chance to play. You can imagine, we've already had a team meeting. You can imagine the excitement that the players have right now. You know, it's a little bit different, you know, practicing when you know that you're getting ready to play a football game. We realize for us, it's just started. Of course, it's about eventually putting a good product on the football field. But as Chancellor Jones said, there's still a lot of work for us to do, a lot of responsibility been placed on us to do what we're supposed to do off of the football field, which gives us a chance to play. But we cherish that. Again, there's a lot of excitement, and can't wait to, you know, get ready to play some football. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Coach. We'll open it up for questions. Reminder, Randy Ballard, our Director of Sports Medicine, is also available today. Scott Beatty, you can lead it off, followed by Matt Stevens and Jeremy Werner.
Thanks very much. My first question is for Chancellor Jones. What in particular, Chancellor, changed for you? And then I also have a question about whether U of I's saliva test was put out there to the Big Ten as an option to help the conference do daily testing.
Well, let me start with the first part of the question. What was a game changer for me was one of the fundamental questions and concerns that we had back in early August was whether or not we would be able to do regular testing at scale with rapid turnaround times. And the responses that we were getting, and this is what all of the chancellors and presidents were insisting upon. We started a process to kind of get a sense for what vendors were out there that could deliver the testing capabilities that we had set forth. And I want to repeat, that was an absolute non-negotiable criteria. You had to be able to do testing, deliver that testing in a timely fashion, to do the contact tracing if necessary, and to be able to do it for the entire football season. And there were some concerns about whether or not that was going to be doable with the technology at the time. And I can tell you, it's amazing how much the COVID-19 testing has evolved over the last 30, 45 days. It's just absolutely wonderful. And so what came back from the medical committee was the notion of using this antigen test and testing all of the players, all the staff that are directly involved with the players on a daily basis, starting from practice all the way through the rest of the season, even on the day of the football game, and getting those results back in a timely fashion. And the way that to confirm those that have a positive antigen test by using RT-PCR was very, very convincing and compelling to myself and my 13 colleagues that lead these Big Ten universities. That was a critical piece. And the second piece was a very clear out strategy. There's still a lot of unknowns about myocarditis. Myocarditis just was coming on the radar screen coming up to that August 11 decision-making day. There were so many unknowns that it caused great concern, not only about playing, but even practicing, because of the connection possibility between those that test positive for COVID-19 and subsequently testing positive for myocarditis. Really caused great concerns to each and every one of us. And this latest proposal that Randy Ballard was part of this committee, and maybe Randy can comment, we were very, very impressed with the thoroughness, the possibility of having a test that you could do on a daily basis, get rapid turnaround of results, and that we had a strategy to mitigate anybody that tested positive or going to be required to have a MRI for myocarditis. And so it gave us a greater sense of assurance that our core principle of the safety of our players and everybody that's going to be on both sides of the sidelines, but especially those on the field, and that you would be able to mitigate the spread of the disease. And our goal is to keep it to 0 to no more than 0.2%. That is the goal, and we think we can get there. And yes, we did offer, I was asked to speak several times about the very innovative saliva-based test that we've developed. And I think some aspects of how we just want to be helpful. And the important thing is we have the testing protocol that's going to allow our young men to come back to play. And whether it's our test or someone else's test, to me, is secondary. The important thing, it has to be a test that works to meet our goals and objectives.
Randy, since the Chancellor brought your name up, Randy, can you address that a little bit since you were on the medical committee?
Yeah, I think we've been working for months, but especially over the last 40 days, specific to contact tracing, specific to the ramifications of catching COVID-19. As those concerns continue to be brought up, the decisions were made. And since then, we've been working to address really those two key components that Chancellor Jones discussed. The daily antigen testing is a game changer to be able to identify someone who's infected before they could possibly infect someone else is huge. And then on the myocarditis side, continuing to gain data from ourselves and from our colleagues around the Big Ten, and being able to share that data to understand what that incidence really looks like, what the ramifications are, and what are the best strategies for identifying that and treating that as we move forward. And so really, we couldn't have done this without all of our partners across the Big Ten and without our local partners on our campus and in our community to be able to ensure that we can do that testing and that we have the mechanisms to follow through with any results that we may get.
Thanks, Randy. Matt Stevens, you're up. Jeremy Werner on deck.
I got two questions, one for Chancellor Jones and one for Josh, if you don't mind. I'll start with Chancellor Jones. I think it's pretty safe to say that since the decision that you and your 13 colleagues on the Council of Presidents and Chancellors made on August 11th, you guys have been hit pretty hard by the Court of Public Opinion in that month and a half. And I was wondering what was going through the discussions from that period on, and do you feel like that led to the presentations that you saw on Saturday, or do you feel like you said in your previous statement that your statement today that it was science-based and it was medical-based, and that you were more or less ignoring the Court of Public Opinion that you guys were getting beat up pretty bad by?
The Court of Public Opinion is going to be there regardless, but what allows me to sleep at night is that, as a scientist, as a scholar, for several decades now, I've always learned to be driven by the data. And the data can be interpreted, and it also can be misinterpreted. And so another way of framing your question, we made the best decision that we could with the information that we had on hand back on August 11th. Wouldn't think about reversing that decision based on the information we had at that time. It was the right decision to make, given the gaps that could not give me, as the chancellor of this university, the great comfort that sending hundreds of our young men out to play football, that they could do it safely and that it wouldn't create a bigger problem for the broader university community. That was absolutely core and critical for me as the chancellor of this university. And so now with this new information, it was very, very clear that a lot of those concerns have been mitigated. And so stood by the original decision we made. It was the right decision to make. And as I said, we were very, very clear. We weren't canceling the season. We were postponing it. And immediately the commissioner stood up two subcommittees, one made up of 8 chancellors and presidents, to think about how do we think about resuming or having some kind of season for football and perhaps other sports. And then the medical group was charged to go back and gather information to answer some of the fundamental questions that led to the decision in August. So all of that, it was not happenstance. We just didn't say, no, we're not going to have football, in discussion, leave us alone. In fact, we said postpone, as we try to take a deep dive as a research-based universities should do. And I remind you, not only we're an athletic conference, there's a Big Ten academic alliance with some of the best scholars in the world who put their minds together around this problem. And we benefited from the fact that we are more than just an athletic conference to get to the point where we make the wonderful, exciting decision that we made today, that we announced today.
Thank you, sir. My quick question for Josh is, with the cancellations and postponements we've already seen in other leagues this fall, a 9-game and 9-week window seems like it is what it is. And when you're talking about living with COVID, have you and your 13 other colleagues in the league had discussions about how, all 14 teams might not play the same amount of games by the end of this year?
We have talked about that. Certainly, I think that anybody who's paying attention to sports recognizes that there will be some challenges. We anticipate that. We certainly don't want it. We don't welcome it, but we do recognize that that's a possibility, especially now that we have the condensed schedule, as you mentioned, 9 games in 9 weeks, and we're prepared to work through those eventualities if they were to come to pass. We'll, I'm sure, here in the coming days, really get into the weeds in terms of standings and how we actually kind of compare apples to oranges. If at the end of the season we do have some teams that have played a meaningful number of games more than another team, but we recognize that and have accepted that as we head into this new season.
Thanks,
Thank
Josh.
you.
Appreciate it.
Jeremy Werner, and then followed up with Nico Heflinger.
Hey, Josh, good to see you. Chancellor Jones, I think, addressed this as well, but the Big Ten obviously took a lot of criticism over the last month. What did you glean from the conferences? I guess bumpy, I guess it'd be fair to say, a little messy. I mean, given everything going on, they're kind of messy journey to get to today's destination of restarting.
I think that there's a lot to be learned, right? I mean, we always learn from both the good decisions we make and sometimes the decisions that we'd like to have a chance to do over. And I think that certainly as a conference in this, and I'm a very proud member of that conference, as I said, I think were there places along the journey where we wish we could have gone and maybe communicated things a little bit differently to different populations. I think probably we did. But I think that through it all, we've really tried to be driven by our intentions, which have been pure. I think that our motives have been in the right place from the beginning. Our values have been aligned, and we've tried to let those guide us. I think one of the challenges that we've certainly, I think that we knew existed, but has shown itself readily here over the last 40 days is the challenge of really working through some of these difficult issues and these difficult conversations in privacy. That's one of the challenges that we have identified here in the last month. It's really hard to work through some of these things which truly need to be confidential. You need to be able to have really discreet, hard, candid conversations around these difficult issues and have confidence that those conversations aren't going to go any further than the people on the line. And we've struggled with that. And that's something that we have to get rectified as a conference. And I think that starting with this announcement, I think that starting with the unanimous decision by the COPC and then working forward from here, I hope that we're in a better place and that we'll be well positioned to learn from some of the lessons that have been out there to experience over the last 40 days.
And kind of a big picture question, Josh. You said this summer, this is what we do, of trying to get back to athletics. I think most of us are looking to get back to what we do, but do it safely and to keep others out of danger. How have you kind of personally worked or reconciled or balanced all of that during the last 6 months?
I'm not quite following your question, Jeremy. I'm sorry.
I guess just coming back into sports while we have a pandemic going on. Obviously, the decision you guys made originally was for safety. Just how have you kind of reconciled or kind of balanced it? I mean, me personally, I kind of struggle with those things too. How have you kind of gone through that?
Yeah, I think for me, as I said kind of at the end of my opening comments, I really think that as a society, we have to learn how to live in this environment. And I think that sports can provide one model to people of how to accomplish this. And so our student athletes, for example, we talked to them today. We've talked to them since they came back this summer, but we reiterated that message this afternoon. Look, there's an obligation here on you as a member of our community that we're going to go out and let you play football. But if we're going to do that, then you have to be prepared to make certain decisions and sacrifices in your personal life that maybe aren't being mirrored by some of your peers across campus. And so if we can stand our student athletes up as an example of how to handle yourselves in a socially responsible, distanced way to help mitigate the spread of the virus, to me, that's a really positive thing. If we can use sports as a release for our society, I think that we've certainly seen increasing rates of mental health challenges and people who are struggling with the virus in a number of different ways in their personal and professional lives. And if we can use sports as a place for people to go back to something that's quote unquote normal and gives them some point of solace during a challenging moment in their life, then that's a really positive thing. And I think that's a real thing that we've seen from our friends and our family members. And so as I think through it, I really feel like the resumption of sports allows us to continue to thread that needle of looking for ways for all of us to get back to some degree of normal, some degree of regular life. And if we can provide hope, if we can provide an example to our friends and community members, then I think that we owe it to our communities to try and do that.
Thanks, Josh. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Okay, Nico, you're up. Bob Asmussen is on deck.
I'm not sure if this would be best answered by Chancellor Jones or Randy Ballard, but I know in the press release it was stressed that it's not only going to be team positivity rates, but population positivity rates. I was just wondering, what does population exactly refer to? Is that campus, county? Is that statewide? What is that population number referring to?
Yeah, so I think the conference will be coming out with some clear definitions on those, but right now that refers to the ones that Chancellor Jones referred to earlier in terms of all the people on our sideline. And so for the population of our football team, that would be all of our student athletes and 50 to 75 members of the support staff, strength and conditioning, sports medicine, the football coaches, all those who are in that inner circle of our student athletes, who take care of our student athletes and support our student athletes. And so I'm sure there'll be some more decisions coming out of the Big Ten office about exactly what that number is and those limitations. But the population number would include student athletes and staff directly affiliated with our football program. And so, again, this is all about mitigating risk and make sure our student athletes aren't getting infected, as well as our staff's not getting infected. We have a duty to protect everyone, not just our student athletes, but our staff and our community as well. And so that population they're referring to is directly to our football team, but we will also be sharing local and state statistics across our conference, so we all aware of the challenges we're all facing and can best make decisions, be it around travel or other decisions as we move ahead.
And then a quick follow-up for Coach Smith, kind of following up on what Josh said, that some of the athletes are kind of going to be held to a higher standard. What is kind of the thought process around the team, knowing that, this is going to be big for the coaches and the players without a bye week and, 21 days off after a positive test? What's kind of the thought process behind what your team has already done and what they're going to need to do the remainder of the season?
Well, as I said, of course, we all want to play. So in order to play, these are the necessary things we have to do. I think it started with that. Our guys, since they came back on campus, we've held them to a higher standard to play. And that'll continue. It's helped an awful lot being here at the University of Illinois, where we've been able to get testing. So it's not like we're going to have to change up an awful lot of what we do. And I'm going to go back to do your job as a teammate, you got to take care of business off of the field. And I have all the confidence in the world that our guys will actually do that. We talked a lot about we're a better football team, and now to get a chance to do that. So we'll do what we need to do to guarantee that there's a clean field and we can play this fall.
Thanks, Coach.
Okay, Bob Osmussen, you're up.
Hey, Coach, I've got a couple of questions. First of all, when you found out that you're going to be able to play, what was your reaction? Remember how you reacted? Who told you how to all go?
Well, I've, Bob, throughout all of this, we have a position coach, we have coordinators, and I'm the head football coach. That's how we've kind of looked at the whole situation. For me as a head football coach, dealing on a bigger picture, I feel like I was position coach. Josh was a coordinator, and Chancellor Jones, of course, was, in the head football position. So that's kind of how we've looked at it throughout. What we've been doing is just kind of concentrating on what we've been able, to control here as much as anything. And as I said, the reaction for the players was, now, it does mean something. It's really hard to keep training when you don't know exactly when you're going to play. But now that we have that, of course, we can get after it.
That kind of leads into my next question. What's the first thing you thought, we got to do this? Was there one thing that jumped in your head right away?
Bob, as a coach, I think you have to have a lot of, plans in place. You can't ever let anything totally surprise you. So we've been planning. Of course, we postponed it was just a postponement of the season. So we knew we eventually would play. So what I've been doing is different scenarios that could come up on when we start practicing, when we start playing, different opponents. And our football team has been, carrying on, getting stronger, bigger, faster, all of that. So today, of course, the first thing that came to mind is that, first off, we have practice today. And along with some other things that's happened, we've been working on a 12-hour week. As of today, we can go back to a 20-hour week. So there's a lot of work we can get done. And again, we're going to be back on the practice field this afternoon and start getting better as a team.
Thanks, Coach.
Okay, we got Jim Cotter, Scott Eisberg, and Kedrick Prince, all in order. Go ahead.
My question's for Chancellor Jones. Chancellor Jones, did you have any interaction with Governor Pritzker over this information, and what input did he give you in that response?
Yes, we always have interactions with the governor about things that are critically important, but I can honestly say it was just briefing his office on the decision that was being made. And there was no effort on his office's part to offer any opinion, or they just wanted to be informed about what was going on. And that was the extent of the engagement with the governor's office. We don't here at Illinois, we don't like to have our state leader surprised by anything. So was very pleased to give them a heads up this morning about the announcement that was forthcoming. It had a very lengthy conversation with Deputy Governor Ruiz, and he was going to brief the governor on that conversation, and Deputy Governor Ruiz was excited about the thoroughness of the approach that we were proposing to take.
Thank you, Chancellor.
Okay, Scott, you're up, and then Kedrick.
Yeah, the question is for Lovey. Just wanted to know, I guess, kind of what the conversation was like with Blake Jarasati, a kid who comes out there to play this year. You decide, all right, the season's off. Let's go ahead and do this shoulder labrum surgery. He has it, and he's happy with the decision with the coaches and the medical team. But now the season's back on. What's that kind of like for you and his mentality, I guess, when the season kind of gets switched to back on?
Well, as we're dealing with any player that's injured that needs something, something fixed, and he had a shoulder injury, so he had to get it taken care of. It's disappointing, though. When you bring in a graduate transfer athlete, of course, you would like for them to be able to play right away. But we had a chance to see exactly who, without getting into past, we had a chance to see who Blake is, what type of football player we feel like he'll be. So it's unfortunate he can't play right away right now, but eventually he will be. We'll wait for him and kind of go from there. We haven't had a lot of injuries, so we feel like we're fortunate in that position. But by Blake not being able to play right away, that's an opportunity. We have a chance now for an all-Illinois high school products of Illinois offensive line, with a guy like, we've been waiting for Vertus Brown to step up, a guy like Vertus Brown, Jordan Slaughter. So we feel like we have some other players that can step in, but we'll miss Blake.
Thanks, Coach.
Welcome.
Okay, Kedrick, you're up, and then Bob Rosenthal.
Hey, hi. So I have one for Coach Smith, and then I have one for Josh Whitman. Coach Smith, obviously this is a good day for Illinois football. But on the other side of it, have you had any feedback from any of the parents or players who are concerned about any of the issues with COVID, or has it all been pretty much positive from players and parents moving forward?
Well, we have communicated with our parents throughout, from the moment the season was postponed, and we tried to keep them informed, along the way. Our parents trust the decision that we'll take, of course, the care of their sons. But again, when you have that type of trust, we've kept the parents involved as much as anything. I know they have voiced to me, of course, how much they wanted to play. And I've already, of course, communicated with quite a few of them today. And it's just excitement right now. They can't wait to get started. And the big question is, how many tickets will we be able to get, Coach? I think we'll be able to handle that.
Okay, well, that's kind of a good question leading up to Josh. What is the typical situation going to be like with the fans? You watched TV this weekend. There was different situations at different games. So how does that work with the fans as far as tickets and what's available, how many can be in the stadium?
Yeah, it's a good question. And part of the directive from the Council of Presidents and Chancellors was there would be a conference mandate that would have no public tickets sold to our stadiums this year. It's important, of course, for the families of our student athletes, both home and visiting, as well as the families of our coaches and staff members, to have a chance to be in the building and support their loved ones. And we'll make arrangements for that to happen. But beyond that, across the conference, we won't have any public fans in the buildings this year. And I think it's a wise decision. It's one that will allow us to maintain not only the health and safety of our participants, but also of our broader community. I think one of the concerns was the influx of people from quote unquote outside the local area. And certainly that's been shown to be one of the risk factors in seeing spikes in the virus. And so that was the decision made at the conference level, and we're prepared to follow those guidelines. Thank you.
Thanks, Kedrick. Followed up by Bob Rosenthal. Gavin Good, you're on deck.
Yeah, my question is for Randy Ballard. It's on the specifics of what the Big Ten laid out today on testing versus what you have been doing. I know Illinois is the only program that was testing daily. And by September 30th, something has to be online to follow the Big Ten guidelines. What specific shifts have to be made in that to meet what the Big Ten is asking for?
You know, we'll shift to what they're doing. We'll likely supplement that with our Shield group. We're moving to an antigen test. The campus saliva test is a PCR-based test. It'll be useful for us in terms of having a third party come in, so we're not further taxing our campus or our sports medicine staff with doing the testing. But in terms of actually getting testing results day of, the Shield group and Chancellor Jones and Andreas and everybody involved on our campus has been phenomenal. And I think that's probably one of the reasons that there was a hard decision to be made back in August, is because we were for sure the front runner in the testing that we had available to, and the testing that we were doing with our students and our student athletes. And so for our student athletes, it may be a little bit different. I think it's likely that the antigen test will go back to a nasal swab versus a saliva-based test, but it will still be very similar to what they've been doing in terms of coming in the door, getting tested, going on to their strength and conditioning sessions. And so the actual procedure probably won't change much. The testing will be a little bit different. The reporting mechanism will be different in terms of a third party managing that. But again, I'm really grateful that we've been able to do that. And I think that's really been a tremendous asset to our student athletes, our department, our community, everything that the Shield group is doing for us. But in terms of that frequency and in terms of those results, we are very grateful to have what now others in the conference will have.
Good, thanks.
Okay, Gavin, you're up. And then Alec after that.
Hey, yeah, my question was for Randy too about the antigen testing with the Big Ten. So it seems like this antigen testing and the way it gives results back is kind of a game changer for not only playing sports, but possibly if this was able to be expanded, it seems like it could be really beneficial for, a lot of people in the country and frontline workers and stuff like that. Do you think that this is something that the Big Ten could work to expand outward?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of entities that are looking forward to being able to expand antigen testing outside of some of the college athletics or some of the entities that are already using it. The news broke probably 2-3 weeks ago in terms of the Abbott test. We actually have some former student athletes that work with Abbott, and we've been in communication with them about their antigen test. And so I think a lot of people see the antigen testing and the availability of antigen testing as a huge game changer. Going back to some of the things that we've already talked about, I remember very early on in one of those task force meetings, an infectious disease doctor saying, at the end of the day, contact tracing and testing are not going to outrace behavior modification. And so, yes, antigen's hugely important, but at the end of the day, we have to make sure our student athletes and our community members are making smart decisions, be it with social distancing, mask wearing, and other things, if we're truly going to get COVID under control and in our communities.
Thank you. I have a question for Chancellor Jones as well. Chancellor, do you think that if if the universities of the Big Ten are using this testing to come back and play football and return to other sports as well, do you think the universities also have an obligation to put their resources towards expanding this testing for student bodies and campus communities that, all this will be happening in?
Well, I mean, that's clearly is a individual university decision, but I can assure you our principles around how we developed and deployed our saliva-based testing was because we knew that in order to be able to detect people that maybe have just contracted the disease and test them again 3 days later before they start to shed virus was critically important. And then being able to isolate those folks and do the appropriate contact tracing with those that they've been in contact with was absolutely critical to our ability to continue our hybrid version of education. I think our data does send a very strong suggestion. Don't get me wrong. I want to be clear about this. Daily testing is absolutely critical in the case of our sports program like football and other contact sports. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation today. I don't think the data supports necessarily for the general population. For example, this university, we do twice a week testing. We only do 3 times a week for those that are at risk because they are living in a residence that has a history of high positive cases. So the research has shown for the last several months, you've got to test at a minimum of twice a week or 3 times a week for the general student, faculty, staff population. That is what we're doing, and that's what we are continuing to do. Because we still are using our digital and physical contact tracing. The beautiful part about this antigen test that is tied to a RT-PCR confirmation test, because I think you're aware that if a student athlete tests, football player tests positive, then he would also have to undergo a RT-PCR test as a confirmatory test to make sure that that's not a false positive. Our saliva test has a very low level of false positive. And because we are testing, and Randy said this, I think, but it's a fact, this was a driver in the decision to go this route. When you're testing people every day or at least 6 out of 7 days per week, it mitigates the need for contact tracing. The data clearly shows that. If you're testing daily, it mitigates the need to be concerned about contact tracing, which is one of the key points that we were concerned about earlier that now we have a solution for. And so I certainly hope that the development of these rapid tests becomes something that universities are more interested in now. And I think it's important to note that we have 2 entities that are spreading our saliva-based tests to other universities across the state of Illinois, to other conjugate care facilities, nursing homes, and ultimately we plan to spread it to K-12 education. And at the same time, there's another group that's looking at spreading it to universities across the country, as well as for-profit and other entities across not only the country and the world. Let me just end with this. Testing, robust testing, is going to be with us for the duration. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know how long COVID-19 is going to last, but I can assure you it's probably going to be with us next football season and the season after that, and maybe even longer. So testing does provide, on a regular basis, provide the ability, I think, for other universities to not just see the tip of the iceberg as it relates to the number of positive cases, but as to see the entire iceberg. And that is the value proposition that we offer with our saliva-based test. That's why we saw a 7-fold increase in the number of positive cases. And in the last 14 days, because our test is an early warning system, we are now back down to levels of about 0.44%. And several days in the past few days, they've been down to 0.31, 0.32%. So testing is absolutely critical where you're talking about normal university operation. It's a game changer as it relates to the athletics.
Thanks. I'd just like to work in one quick question for Josh, if I have time. Okay. Thank you. Josh, it seems like, reading from the Big Ten, there's going to be some announcements coming soon about the rest of fall sports. But if football is able to resume and you guys are able to get that going, I'm wondering, Illinois, you said you guys are really not trying to cut any sports. And you seem like you guys have that as a priority, but some other universities have already cut some sports. Do you think it's going to be a priority for the athletic directors in the league to make sure that some of this revenue that's saved is used to make sure that further cuts for Olympic sports aren't made?
It's a fair question, Gavin. I really can't speak for my colleagues. I think that the reality is that certainly today's announcement will help us financially. It makes our picture a little better than it was when we woke up this morning. But it's not going to be a silver bullet either. I think that, certainly we're going to continue to work through the challenges presented by 9 football games instead of 12, by not having public ticket sales. Those are all things that obviously have pretty dramatic implications for our bottom lines. So, when we're talking about some of the revenue reductions we've seen, some of the numbers that have been thrown out around the conference, today's announcement helps, but it's not also going to solve all those challenges in one day. And so I know here at Illinois, again, that's been a priority for us, but every program has to continue to work through those situations independently and figure out what makes the most sense in their environment. And I trust my colleagues to continue to do that.
Okay.
Thanks, Josh.
Thanks, Gavin. Alec, you're up. Gabby's on deck. Scott Ritchie in the hole. We're going to run out of time here shortly, so hopefully we can get through these quickly. Go ahead, Alec.
Thanks, Matt. I've got a couple. One for Lovey. I don't know if you saw the comments that Howard Griffith made this morning on Big Ten Network, but he said that the schools that have a successful weight strength and conditioning program might have a little bit of an advantage with these last couple of months, particularly last month, I guess. Can you comment on how your strength and conditioning program has maybe changed or been altered in the last month when you didn't think you may have had a season this fall?
Well, I didn't see any of, I don't know exactly what Coach you said, his comments, but I just know what we do here. Our strength and conditioning program is led by Lou Hernandez, one of the best in the business. He's flexible. We've had to, of course, change throughout. We feel very confident that our guys will be in good condition, strength-wise, conditioning-wise, to be able to pick up with full speed ahead practices and be ready for a season that will be a little bit different. No bye week. So it's going to be a long stretch of time. But that's why, to me, even when we pause our season, we continue to lift and do those things. And I just know we'll be ready.
Thanks, Coach. The next question I had was for Chancellor Jones. You mentioned the very low positivity rate in the last week or so. I know in August, I'm sure you were a little bit concerned with that positivity rate getting a little bit higher as a lot of students came back onto campus. Now that you're starting to see the positivity rate fall, and I don't think there's been more than 50 cases in the last 3 or 4 days, did that kind of make your vote maybe a little bit easier in the fact that maybe you weren't as concerned of football players and hopefully eventually other student athletes contracting and spreading the virus within their teams and within their programs?
No, to be clear, I think the positivity rate on campus is going to be a factor that's going to be of great concern as we roll out this antigen plus RT-PCR testing capability. My primary concern in the actions we took 14 days ago was in response to the spike in cases in our student population by students that were disregarding isolation protocol and requirements. So my decision and the collective decision by the council presidents and chancellors, it really didn't have much to do with that per se. This was about keeping the cases down at the level so that we can continue this hybrid version of education that we started on in August. That was the main driver. We had our modelers, our biophysicists had predicted that we should probably have no more than 700 cases over the entire semester. And all of a sudden, in the course of a few days, we went from 44 cases, which was manageable, 0.4% infection, to having a 2.89% infection. And if it were not for our rapid testing capability, we wouldn't have known that. And so unlike some of the other institutions that had to revert to remote education because of this type of rise, and I remind you, 2.89% is a lot lower than most of our peer institutions, but our goal is close to 0 to 0.2 as possible for the rest of the semester. And so the actions we put in place on campus was to mitigate it for the campus. That had no direct impact on my decision to support the opportunity to move back to have a football program this fall. They were separate issues.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Gabby, you're up, and then Scott Ritchie.
Hi, I just had a couple for Josh and then Chancellor Jones. Josh, in terms of the other fall sports, have you had a chance to speak with athletes from like other fall sports like volleyball, soccer, cross country? Because I'm sure they're feeling a little confusion right now with just the football announcement coming separate from their sports.
Yeah, we haven't had a chance to visit with them yet. We'll, I think, get into the details on what to do with the other sports starting tomorrow morning on our daily call with the athletic directors. I think that, sitting here today, there are several factors that I think are different, particularly for us with volleyball and soccer. Those NCAA championships, for example, have already been moved to the spring. And so there's a new dynamic there to consider. Obviously, the postseason is of significant interest in both of those sports for us, and we want to best position our student athletes to have access to that tournament and to be well prepared to have success in that tournament. So that will be a big part of that discussion, I'm sure, at the conference level. Cross country is a little bit of a unique sport in that most of those student athletes also participate in indoor track and field and outdoor track and field. And so of our various student athletes, I think they're the group that may stand to gain the most, other than football, from a resumption in the fall. And so we'll engage in that conversation with the other ADs in the conference starting tomorrow and see what kinds of conclusions we're able to draw.
Okay, and then in terms of football, is there a plan in place right now for if you would have to postpone a game if there were too many positive tests on the team?
We have put in place, I think that's one of the significant changes between today and in early August when we made the original decision to postpone. We are in a position now to really adopt, as Chancellor Jones was saying, a true data-driven approach to those decisions. We're going to take the subjectivity out of determining whether we're going to practice or whether we're going to play. Those standards were part of the Big Ten's press release today. And there will be a dashboard that's shared across the conference. So there's great transparency in terms of where each program stands relative to its positivity rates, both in terms of total numbers of tests and within the relevant population. So I think that's an important piece. How we'll handle those situations in terms of rescheduling. The one thing that we have lost here over the last month is some of the flexibility that we had in the original schedule, just by virtue of the calendar and wanting to be sure that we're in a position to wrap the season before the postseason bids are announced relative to the CFP and the bowl system. And so we don't have a ton of flexibility there, but what you could see, and we've already seen this in a couple other leagues, is if certain games have to be canceled that open up windows in the future within that 9-game framework, then there always could be some dominoes that fall to shift and try and accommodate. But I think that as we go into it, we know that we don't have a lot of wiggle room on the schedule. And so we might be in a position where we're seeing more cancellations instead of reschedules if the health of any given team at any given moment doesn't allow us to play.
Thank you. I had one quick one for Chancellor Jones. You just said the student body didn't really affect your revote, but how will the student body and the case rate of the student body affect football going forward? Like if there were to be a huge outbreak on campus and, you know, students weren't allowed on campus, how does that affect football being played on campus?
Well, I think because of the structure we put in place, and this is captured in this scenario that Josh has described, where the positivity rate on campus is one of the factors that we will be looking at going forward as we implement the fall season. But by the same token, not allowing students or fans in the stadium really is going to help make sure that that potential rise or hypothetical rise, Gabby, you were talking about, is not further exacerbated by people coming to campus. And let me just give you an example why restricting the games to families only is critically important. We have a pretty rigorous process here. And let me just give you an analogy. If you're a faculty member who's teaching mostly online, if you want to come to campus to get a book out of your office and you haven't been to campus in a month or two, you have to go get tested before you can go to your office to get that book. So it would become a very problematic for me and this campus as the chancellor if we are allowing thousands of people to come from the outside and don't have the ability to test them before the game. And that's one of the reasons why I wish we didn't have to do this, but if we're going to continue to keep our levels low, we have to mitigate large gatherings. I just sent a note to our students today telling them to avoid large gatherings of more than 10 people at all costs for the rest of the semester, maybe it be the rest of the academic year. So you can't think about having fans back on campus without thinking about the broader potential to cause a SPAC, not only on the university campus, but in the community. And we're very pleased at this point, unlike some of the other college towns and certain communities, that has been spread from the campus to the broader community, but knock on wood, not so far here in Urbana-Champaign, and we plan to try to keep it that way.
Thank you.
Okay, we got time for one more question. Scott Ritchie, and then that'll be a wrap today. Scott.
Okay, I had a question for Josh, just to sort of follow up on volleyball and soccer. Maybe in your discussions with Chris and Jana, have they expressed maybe what they would like to see in, I mean, if you got to the point where a fall season would happen, knowing that the championships won't be till the spring?
Yeah, I think first of all, I've just got to comment, Scott, on the hair. You know, as a bald guy, I really am envious of what you've been able to do on top there during the pandemic. So kudos on that. But in terms of Janet and Chris, I think that they're both comfortable with the spring approach. You know, it's not like football necessarily in terms of the physical toll and the recovery time needed between seasons. And so I think they've been very active in talking with their colleagues across the conference. Those coaching groups have been meeting regularly, as has Lovey and the football coaches as well. So they've, I think, collectively come to a point where they're excited about the spring season. They've been working on a variety of different models. We'll have to get a good understanding of those start dates and how that would eventually segue into the postseason like we talked about. You know, I think and the nice thing is right now they've continued to engage in pretty intense practices and preparation. And so it's been a great opportunity for them to do some team building, to really work through some skill development and do, I think, gain back some of the time that was lost in the spring when they would ordinarily have a chance to go out and get some additional preparation. And so all in all, I think this is going to end up being a positive experience for both of those programs, and grateful to both those coaches for their flexibility and also to those student athletes for all the commitment that they've shown as well working through this entire experience.
Just as maybe a quick follow-up, I know a couple of the Power 5 conferences that we're moving forward with volleyball, soccer. We're going to do very condensed fall seasons. Is that maybe what you expect to maybe be popular when you discuss this tomorrow?
I'm not sure. I really don't know. I'll be curious to get some feedback from across the league and hear what others are thinking. I think that, we've got to be sure that we're prepared on the testing side to get everybody access to the testing that they would need before we would open it up to any kind of outside competition. But certainly, I think we'll continue to evaluate opportunities to get our student athletes as prepared as they can possibly be, whether that's focusing internally or potentially opening it up to some external work as well. And we'll just have to work through that together as a conference here over the coming days.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I appreciate everybody today. We're over an hour today. Josh, Randy, Chancellor Jones, Coach Smith, appreciate all your time today and the questions. We'll have some further information as we get it in the coming days. We'll have further information on football practices and availabilities around that, around with media, players and coaches after practices in the coming days as we start pulling all that information together as well. So appreciate everybody's time and have a great rest of your day. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.